Hi, everyone. Well, I want to thank United Women on the Fly for having me tonight. I'm going to share with you my lessons learned and some tips, and hopefully make your next trip, the chances of success is going to be higher. So a little bit about myself. I've been fly fishing since 2011. After I joined the Georgia Women Fly Fishers. I live in Atlanta, so saltwater is not really in my backyard. I do have to, travel for, 6 hours to get to the coast. My first saltwater trip was in 2013. We went for redfish in the Louisiana. And since then, I just keep, going back. I've been back there for a few times more. And also I have been visiting Xcalac, Mexico to fish. Also the Andros in the Bahamas, South Carolina, Georgia, and also Florida. And lately I've been going to Belize a lot because I'm just obsessed with the permit over there. All right, so with all those trips, I definitely make a lot of mistakes, but I also learn a lot. And also there's some things that I wish I knew beforehand. So tonight I'm going to share with you my lessons learned and some tips, and hopefully make your next trip, the chances of success is going to be higher. All right, so first, when let's say if you have decided to go to the Bahamas to catch some bonefish, you'll be thinking about when to go, right? So the prime time to me is going to be when the fish are around and they are active. Now, that piece of information, you can definitely ask your angler friends who have been there before. You can also do a lot of research on the internet. You can read fishing reports. You can ask your local fly shops. And also, if you're booking with a guide shop, a guide service or a lodge, they will definitely make some recommendations. But they may also tell you that the fish is year round, you can catch them anytime. Which is true if you have a good professional guide, he or she will be able to find fish for you under most circumstances. But we are talking about how to maximize your chances of success here. So I think the next major ingredient is going to be the sun. So for saltwater fly fishing, you need to sight fishing, and there will be little blind casting. And you and your guide have to be able to spot the fish. And so you need sun for that. And also you will need to be able to cast to them. So you want to go to a time that is not too windy, and you want to be comfortable on the water. For example, May and June is supposed to be a lot of bonefish in the Andros, the Bahamas. However, this is also when the horsefly is going to come out very active and can bite through your clothes and draw blood. So you might want to be, over there during May or June. And also the temperature could be a factor too, right? You don't want to be too hot and it's not comfortable. So that's why, when I, before I decide when to go, I will look at the average weather of my destination. So this is the average weather of Belize, St. Pedro in Belize. If you look at, on the left-hand side, the month of February and March, definitely you got the most clear skies. The sight fishing is going to be easier. August and September is going to be harder because there's, a lot more cloud cover. And also the rainfalls, June and October are going to be worse. So that's another thing that you need to consider. Looking at the wind, June, on average is going to be windier than the rest of the year. Now, I've been to St. Pedro, this area, 5 times in the past year. And every time I have a day or two, at least, that I have to deal with 20 miles per hour plus wind. So you have to deal with windy condition one way or the other. But some months it's just going to be a little bit worse than the other months. Looking at the temperature, the month of August, September definitely is going to be the hottest months of the year. So you'll be less comfortable on the water. However, in this area, the big tarpon starts showing up in June and it's going to be all the way until October. So maybe the summer months is not that bad, but you just have to get up early, start fishing like 6 o'clock, so that you'll be done early and won't be too hot. The wind directions also plays a role. So if you see it right here, November, there's a lot of north wind coming from the north. That means cold fronts moving in. That means changing weather, right? So the fish, when weather changing, they need some time to adjust. So it might impact the fishery too. All right, so now you have in your mind, you cannot decide on the month. So how about which dates should I go? And one thing that you may want to consider is the tide. Here I have the tide chart of St. Simon's Islands in Georgia for the month of April this year. The blue arrows indicate the high tides, and then the red arrows indicate the low tide. When your tide is going from low to high, that's incoming tide. When your tide is coming from going down from high to low, that is the outgoing tide. There's a term called spring tide, and spring tide occurs, during full moon or new moon. That's when the moon and sun on the earth in alignment. So your sun will add to the gravitational pull. So during spring tide, your tide is going to be, your high tide is going to be higher, and your low tide is going to be lower. So look at here on April 1st, this is a new moon. And the high tide is going to be 7.3 feet high, which is higher compared to the other days. And then there's something called neap tide too. So neap tide occurs, during the first quarter moon or the third quarter moon. That is when the moon is kind of like a half moon. So during this time, the tide is going to be weaker. So your high tide is going to be lower and your low tide is going to be higher. There's another term called Parisian spring tide, which occurs, when the full moon or the new moon coincides with the perigee of the moon, which is the point when the moon is closest to the earth. During that time, your tide is going to be higher too. It'll be extra higher, and it probably occurs 6 to 8 times per year. And some refer this Parisian spring tide as king tides or flood tides. Another term here is slack water. Slack water means, the water has little or no movement. If you fish in the saltwater flats, that means, when the tide reaches the highest point, and it's going to be turn around and recede, or when your tides, at the lowest point, and then it's going to be rising again. Slack water, probably lasts for 2 to 3 hours. And some consider this to be the, not so good, worst time to fish, because your bait level will drop off and your fish is not going to be as active. However, I caught plenty of bonefish doing slack water. The bonefish just hanging out, doesn't matter. They're in the shallow, you cast to them, they still take the flies. But maybe perm is a little bit more difficult during slack water. So what is the best tides for fishing? I personally like incoming tides because it the ocean bring in fresh water, bring in clear water, bring in lower water temperature and the oxygen. So I like incoming tides, and especially incoming tides with the right sun angle. That means, morning from, 8 o'clock until 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. How about spring tide, neap tide, or king tide, flood tides? Which one is better? If you ask different people, they're going to give you different answers. I remember Amy Hazel in the last United Women on the Fly meeting, she mentions that she prefer neap tide. And then there's some folks that they won't fish during full moon for various reasons. And then some fish, could be better at a certain condition. For example, it is very popular to fish for redfish during the flood tides in the fall, because then your marsh will have more water, and the redfish can cruise around in it and bush the bait fish. And regardless, be very careful with the tides, because when you're low tide, you can wade to a spot. But then when the tides come up, you may have a hard time coming back. So always check for the tide before you go out. I have an app on my phone, the new Tide, NAUTIDE app, so that I can have tide information handy.
You can all get lost in tides you could get really lost in tides, because there's not only neap tides and spring tides, there's diurns, 30 different, 30 different really good saltwater guides. Every single one of them is going to pick a different tide that they like to fish. So to Circe's point, in the beginning, don't worry so much about the tides, because you could get really caught up in it, and you don't want to not take a trip because you don't think the tide's going to be right. And only last comment, which is just an added comment, because I thought Circe really did a great job, my friend, is if you are in a lodge, and you remember first and foremost and for always that you're paying for your guide. And at the end of a day, if you just aren't, it's just not working, you're just not clicking, you get right to the fishing manager of that lodge. You don't need to fish for 5 or 6, even 2 consecutive days with someone that it's just not working for you. And I promise you that most lodges, most reputable lodges, won't blink an eye, and they'll scramble, they'll rearrange so that you're fishing with someone else.
All right, a few more tips about trip planning. I recommend definitely at least plan 4 days of fishing, if not more. Because some days the weather's not going to be as ideal. Like in the picture in here, it was totally dark that morning. We didn't see a single fish. So you want extra days. And also I like to add a days, or 2 for sightseeing and relaxing, so that, you can rest mentally and physically. And plus you get to experience the local culture. And I like to have that sightseeing day on the day that the tide is not as good. And then I cannot stress enough that for saltwater fly fishing, you do need a very good fishing guide. A good fishing guide can, use his or her knowledge, find the fish, depending on, in a vast area, right? And depending on the tides, the water clarity, the wind direction, and all that. And, and for the most part, the guy will be spotting the fish for you and tell you where to cast. So you and your guy will be working as a team. So a good guy definitely will be really, really advantageous. And if you have a bad fishing guide, then you'll be a waste of time and money, and maybe even ruin one of a lifetime opportunity. So definitely, do your research, get some references, find a guy who is local to the area because they know the best. If you book with a lodge or outfitter, make sure that if you can, request your guide instead of letting them assign you a guide. Because, if you know which one is better, of course, you want to request the guide to guide you, right? The other thing is like, many good fishing guides, in the US or even in a foreign country, for the prime time is really have to book like many months ahead, some maybe even a year ahead. So I will plan ahead and don't wait until last minute to book your guide. So, okay, I have a little quiz here. We got 5 fish, and you can see the dorsal fins. And can you name the fish? I'll give you a minute. You can write down a piece of paper, make a mental note. You ready? All right. The first one is a shark. Sorry, I throw you a curveball. B is a permit. C is a bonefish. And D is a tarpon, and E is a snook. So anybody got it all correct here? I bet there's somebody. Well, if you got it all correct, oh, there you go. Joanne, of course. Yeah. Well, you are way better than when I first started chasing this fish, except the shark. I never really tried to chase the shark, but I really didn't know that much when I started fishing for them. I wish that I spent the time and learned about them early on, so that I have better success. So what we're trying to learn here is the look, like how the dorsal fins look like, how the tail looks like, how do they distinguish from each other. So the permit, the fin is kind of black in color, versus the bonefish fins is going to be translucent. You also want to, see how the push might look like, the push, the wake that create on the water looks like, how they roll, tarpon, how they roll maybe looks like on the water. You want to understand if they like grass bottom, do they like salt bottom? What type of food do they like? Crabs, shrimps and bayfish and all that. And do they like shallow water, or do they like deep water? Do they like incoming tides or outgoing tides? Things like that. And definitely, you can find a lot of this information on the internet. If you go to YouTube, search for like tailing pyramid, you're going to see tons of videos. And then also, your fellow anglers, fly shops, and definitely your guide. Guide will be a very good resources. So when you first got on the boat, ask your guide what you should be looking for, and ask the guide to tell you about the fish. A few more tips about trip preparation. Definitely check your gear before the trip. Make sure that, let's say your sunglasses, make sure that if you have a prescription, make sure the prescription is up to date for your fly line on your reel. Clean it before, and I use something like a Reel Agent X to clean my line before the trip. Make sure it's nice and smooth for casting, and organize your flies. Buy and tie your flies, whatever you do, and organize your fly box. I'm kind of obsessed with that, so I weight my flies and organize it by weight. Also, get the leaders, get the tippets, and all that stuff. And I know that, some guide surveys, it might include leaders, tippets, and flies in the guide package, which is very nice. But also know that in many of those places, going to be very remote. In some foreign countries, it's very hard for the guide surveys to get those items. So I would like to have extra myself, and also want to help out too. So anybody follow J-Boat Art on the Instagram? This is a cartoon, and I from him. His cartoons really depicts the funny moments and also the stressful moments on a saltwater fly fishing boat. Here you got an angler has a line wrapping all around his leg and also wrapped around the console, and there's a dolphin that he is trying to catch. So the leg parts definitely happened to me before, and in fact more than once. So I would say that line management is very important. Usually, as soon as the boats stop to a location, I'm getting ready to fish. I strip all my line out. I will cast it out and strip back so that the line will be piling correctly on the platform. And I will do it, like once in a while, just in case too, because as you're cruising around looking for fish, you might have to clear again. And I try to have too much line out, only with the amount that I can cast, and also with the amounts that I need. I like to wear a pair of socks that have cushion, doing cushion socks, and so that if I stand on my line, I will feel it. One time I have camera clipped on my belt, and the line wrapped around the belt, and that cost me a very nice redfish. Once the redfish started to run, it was gone. So just be careful with that too. Okay, so I would like to kind of touch on the mental aspect of saltwater fly fishing. So we are spending very long days on the water looking for fish, and there may be long period of time that's really nothing. And so, I have to tell myself to be patient and also to remain focused. And this is a picture of some tailing permits. Boatmate Tammy, she took that picture while I was on the platform, trying to be ready to cast. And as soon as I see those permit tails, my heart just started racing. I rushed my cast, delivered cast, just snap on the water. I wasn't listening to my guide. I was so preoccupied by my mistake, and it just, keep piling up those, thoughts in me. So I would say, try to slow down, try to cast normally, and listen. No, that's very hard, because to me it's very hard, because I have to react in a split second to something that, I really wanted so much. And there's so much pressure. And some of you guys, who may be competing in, participating in some competitive sports, you might have some tips that you use or techniques that you use to dealing with the pressure. For me, I actually asked Kat Valerie. She is the current world record holder of catching permit with 4-pound test and 6-pound test. And she also finished the 3rd place in 2020 IGFA permit fly fishing tournament. I felt like against 18 other men, I really admire her. And I thought that like if anybody would know how to deal with pressure, it will be her. So I asked her tips. So this is what she shared with me. Think of every shot as a clean slate, that you can start all over again. And don't beat up yourself with the mistake that you made already. And try to practice mindfulness on the water. So to bring yourself back to the present. So, close your eyes and the sun shining on you, feel the breeze, feel the temperature and all that. And just remember you're there to have fun. So don't get too serious and then it's not fun anymore. So I hope you found these tips helpful and thank you so much and feel free to reach out.